In the year 2020, Spider-Man movies have pretty much become its own subgenre. In the past 10 years alone, Spider-Man has appeared in 8 different films. It's not including the spin-offs like Venom. We're also getting a Morbius movie with Jared Leto as Morbius, which somehow ties in with the MCU, because in the Morbius trailer, Michael Keaton shows up as the Vulture, but it's still not an MCU movie according to the studios producing it, so I don't know what the fuck is going on. Meanwhile, the animated movie that came out is better than any of the live action movies they're making, so it's all just crazy shit. While I like all the new stuff, I miss the simpler days when Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies dominated the box office while staying grounded in its own universe. And it all started in 2002 when Sam Raimi directed Spider-Man. I saw this in theaters more than once, and I was really young, but I pretty vividly remember everyone's minds being blown by the special effects. And rewatching it today, they still hold up. It still looks real, and not that shit from the 80s. God, look at that. And the movie is overall still very good. Flawed, yes. Cheesy, yes. But as a child, this movie was the greatest thing on the planet, so it's got a special place in my heart. This one is pretty quick about establishing everything. In the opening scene, not only are we naturally introduced to Peter, Mary Jane, Harry, and Norman, but Peter also gets bit by the spider. It gets right into it, and I love that. I do have some issues with this scene. They aren't anything major. The extras are stupid. Look at these dumbasses. In every shot, they're in the same spot on these stairs. It's like a special ed class is walking the wrong way on an escalator or something. Also, Peter. He's a smart guy, right? How come he doesn't tell anybody he got bit by a radioactive spider? Regular spiders can kill you, and these have been injected with sciencey nuclear fucking Chernobyl chemicals, and Peter decides to keep it to himself. He doesn't even tell his aunt and uncle. He just goes to his room and passes out and wakes up with superpowers. He didn't know that was gonna happen. One thing I really love about this movie is the main villain. That's something Sam Raimi's really good at. In all these movies, the bad guy's done very well. Well, 3 out of the 5 bad guys were done well. If you ask me, Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn is one of the best villain portrayals of all time.
I started this company. You know how much I sacrificed?
This movie is equally an origin movie for him as it is an origin movie for Spider-Man. Sure, his costume is pretty dumb, but who gives a shit? His performance is great. All of the performances in this movie are great, really. Tobey Maguire is awesome as Spider-Man. The scene after Uncle Ben dies and he's running after the guy is done extremely well. It still holds up to this day. Fucking J.K. Simmons as J. Jonah Jameson is the most brilliant casting ever.
But I never said you have a job. Meat. I'll send you a nice box of Christmas meat. Best I can do. Get out of here.
Nothing like taking selfies in a skin-tight suit after covering strangers in my body's sticky white goo, and then selling those pictures to an old man for money. I love how he's a dick to Peter, but even when his life is on the line, he doesn't give up Peter's identity.
Who's the photographer who takes the pictures of Spider-Man?
I don't know who he is. His stuff comes in the mail.
You're lying!
I swear.
The action can be silly at times, and so can the practical effects. Like, not only is that clearly a dummy, but Mary Jane's hair is blowing in the wrong direction. Spider-Man definitely jumps on a trampoline right here. Once again, the extras are fucking stupid. The Green Goblin is making Spider-Man choose between saving Mary Jane or a cable car with a class full of children inside. Even though I'm like 99% sure that elementary schools do not take field trips in the middle of the night, my guess would be that R. Kelly is operating this cable car and Green Goblin is doing these kids a favor. So of course, Spider-Man saves everyone, but the scene is still super tense and very well done. Especially when the citizens are throwing all of their shit at the Green Goblin, and when the Green Goblin and Spider-Man finally have their one-on-one, it's very brutal for a Spider-Man movie. I mean, he gets the shit kicked out of him. It's pretty bloody, and I fucking love it. So then Norman dies, makes Peter promise not to tell Harry that his dad was a psycho murderer. Harry forgives Peter for stealing his girlfriend, but swears to kill Spider-Man. This, to me, is the most interesting aspect of the entire trilogy. That friendship just crumbling over time. What I hate is the way Mary Jane just makes out with Peter at Harry's dad's funeral. That's a bitch move, Mary Jane. In the end, this one is silly, but it holds up for sure. I prefer it to anything Andrew Garfield or Tom Holland has done, so what does that tell you? 2 years later, and Spider-Man 2 is already hitting theaters. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it with this one, okay? This movie is incredible. It's my favorite Spider-Man movie, without a doubt, and it might be my favorite Marvel movie overall. Not only does it hold up, but it surpasses just about every comic book movie that comes out nowadays. Everything has improved from the first movie. All of the characters are much more fleshed out, especially Peter. This movie kicks his ass. You feel so bad for this guy. He's failing classes because he's out saving people. He can't be with the woman he loves because he wants to protect her. Meanwhile, she's falling in love with someone else right in front of him. His best friend is starting to hate him because he takes pictures of Spider-Man. And like a million little details that Raimi brilliantly weaves throughout this movie. There isn't non-stop action. It focuses heavily on the individual characters more than anything else. And if you ask me, that's how movies should be. All people want anymore is non-stop explosions and action. But this movie doesn't focus on that. And when there is action in this movie, shit. It's the best action out of any superhero movie I've ever seen. No exaggeration. The train scene is quite possibly my favorite superhero fight scene of all time. And the way that scene wraps up is so emotional and brilliant. I love this scene. Now, this movie clearly has to set up Harry being the villain of the third movie. Usually when movies do this, it does it by adding on forced scenes that don't serve the plot. However, Harry's arc goes very well alongside this movie, and his progression feels natural and totally justified by the end. Harry is done so fucking well in these movies, it's insane. Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus is brilliant. Perfect casting. One of my favorite comic book movie villains ever. Sam Raimi does a great job at making the bad guy a character, you know? He's a good guy at first. He's likable. The movie's not perfect. It's got some stupid scenes that I've tried to figure out, but I just can't. Like, Peter clearly shuts down Mary Jane in order to protect her early on in the movie, as he did at the end of the first movie. And then she gets another boyfriend, and then Peter decides he wants to learn poetry so he can win back Mary Jane. Like, something isn't adding up there. And my biggest problem with the movie is when Dr. Octopus is looking for Peter because he needs to ask him a question, he decides to approach Peter by lunging a fucking car at the back of his head. He needs Peter alive to get this information, and he has no idea Peter is Spider-Man. I know this because the information he needs from Peter is where is Spider-Man. So why did he throw a fucking car at him? What did he think was gonna happen? You stupid retarded fucking idiot. You need him alive. Anyway, yeah, this movie's incredible. Don't lie. This is the one you want me to talk about the most. Spider-Man 3 gets a lot of hate and is widely regarded as the worst Spider-Man movie ever made. Is it the worst Sam Raimi film? Yeah. Is it the worst Spider-Man film? Fuck no! This one gets too much hate if you ask me. But even with that said, it's definitely pretty stupid. It's got a lot of good things about it, but it suffers from one big issue. There's too much shit going on. This one has 3 villains and they all use up a lot of screen time. Harry gets sidelined so they can fit more Sandman and Venom, even though he should be the main villain. The scenes with him are good, but they're few and far between. There are a lot of what the fuck moments in this movie. Scenes, little scenes that don't need to be there, but they are there and they make the movie stupid. Sandman being Uncle Ben's actual killer? What the fuck? Sandman getting turned to sand because there's a big machine that spins sand and he stands in the middle of it.
There's a change in the silicon mass.
Yeah, it's probably a bird. It'll fly away when we fire it up.
A bird. It might be a bird? What the fuck? Why is Peter such an asshole in this movie? Even before he gets the black suit, He's a prick, so don't use the black suit as an excuse. Peter kisses a woman in front of Mary Jane and doesn't think that it will bother her. He wants to go and propose to her afterwards. How stupid is he? I have a huge problem with this scene. How'd he do that? He can't just vaporize. What the fuck just happened? The dancing in the jazz club is pretty much the lowest point of the entire trilogy. Now, speaking of dancing, a lot of people think the scene of him dancing down the street was dumb too. I found that scene hilarious, and I think it fits his character really well. I mean, he's a nerd who suddenly thinks he's cool. It's funny, come on. I mean, it fits his character. I think Harry was a good villain. Sandman was almost a good villain. And Venom was a stinky fucking ass turd. Eric Foreman is not Venom. Why can't Sam Raimi tell the studio to go screw themselves? You can tell he didn't want Venom in there, and so we get a butchered and rushed version of the character. Venom is my favorite Spider-Man villain, and this movie just shoehorns him in with only 10 minutes of screen time maybe, and a weak-ass motivation. Even with all that said, I don't hate Spider-Man 3 at all. It's got stuff I like. The score is outstanding, especially during the Birth of Sandman scene, which also has outstanding CGI work. Kirsten Dunst is great in the entire movie. I feel as if she's the only character that isn't an asshole or an oblivious idiot. Peter getting the black suit for the first time. I love this line.
I was trying to figure out what to say.
If it's a woman you're calling, then you say, "You're a good woman, I'm good man."
The hand-to-hand fight between Harry and Peter is my favorite fight scene in the entire movie. Harry and Peter teaming up at the end is really rewarding, and the ending feels impactful. Yeah, there's a lot of dumb shit, but it's still better than half of the MCU in my opinion. It's not bad, it's just not good. It's so fucking close though. In fact, I'm gonna fix Spider-Man 3 in my next video. Like a plot summary of what could have been a great Spider-Man movie. So definitely stick around for that one. Swing on by when it's uploaded. Don't forget to watch my video on the website. That was stupid. Here's a Spider-Man joke for you. Why can't Tony Stark wear the Spider-Man suit? Because he's dead.